Hello, Leapers. Welcome back to the Quantum Leap podcast. I'm Christopher DeFilippis, and today joining me is Allison. Hi, Allison.
Hi.
And Albie. And we have a very special guest, Mr. Drew Lindo, a producer and writer on Quantum Leap. Drew, welcome back to the Quantum Leap podcast.
I'm really happy to be back. I've been looking forward to this a long time. And this time I get to talk to Allison as well, which is new for me.
Yeah, nice meeting you.
Nice meeting you too.
It's always a thrill for all of us when we get to talk to Allison. So we're in that rarefied air.
She's a celeb.
So we invited you back on, Drew, because I don't know if you know this, but the season finale of Quantum Leap has aired, and you were an integral part of that. So we'd love to talk to you about episode 213, which was called Against Time. You wrote this episode?
I did write this episode. I think I was on set for 206. We were shooting Secret History, and Dean Georgeris, the co-showrunner, called and said, "Just want to let you know, I'm writing 8 right now, and I can't be there around to supervise anything, but I want to let you know that Ben and Derek are writing 12, and you're writing 13." And my jaw fell off of my face, and I was absolutely speechless because I've never had the opportunity to write a season finale before. I wrote a season premiere for a show called Rain on the CW years ago for season 4. And I've written some really, I've enjoyed writing every episode I get to do, but this, a finale has a lot of expectations and the opportunity for some massive payoffs, which I knew we were headed for. But to get to find ways to make it my own in some ways and have some authorship was exciting. I also knew that we were heading into a strike. So I was like, I really hope we get to do those back 5 because we have no guarantee what's going to happen and how long the strike will last. So weirdly, what happened was they were still breaking some episodes in the room while I was shooting episode 6. And then suddenly I learned that they were sort of done breaking at least those iterations of 10, 11, and 12. And they were like, we're going to start working on 13 now. And I was like, there's 2 days left in the shoot. So I was like hearing updates of stuff they were thinking about. And we knew certain things needed to happen at the end of the season that Dean and Martin had already settled on, but we needed to figure out what was the story around that, what was the leap itself. And so when I came back in the room, I was like, I feel like these are all worthy of a whole episode, but we won't have that. The nature of the story is going to be different. And somebody said the word race car, and my mind just exploded with ideas and excitement about A, what a great leap in, but B, what a great way to sort of attack the themes of the season in a literal, in a literal race against time. And that was the day before the strike. We kind of settled on a shape and then went pencils down for 5 months and didn't touch or look at anything, didn't touch anything in post, and we came back 5 months later and the room got together with Dean and Martin and said, here's what we were working on the day before the strike. And they were like, that sounds exciting and emotional and on point for the story we're telling. And so we just, knocked the whole thing into shape pretty quickly, honestly, because it when it feels right, you're in the right direction. And I'm really amazed they let me do what I got to do with that episode. There was a lot of stuff where I was like, are they going to let me talk about this or explore this? Because these are not deep cuts, but they're not stuff that we've touched on. The best stuff, for example, we haven't really touched on, but it was something I'd always wanted to get into the show. Stuff I talked about with Georgina and Susan on set all the way back on Somebody Up There Likes Ben. So that stuff was all great to get into, but also just to take everything Ben's been through all season and channel it into like his greatest failure becoming his finest hour was a really exciting journey to take him and Addison both on.
I know it's probably pretty easy when you're on strike to put the pencil down and physically go on strike, but it's probably hard to tell your subconscious mind to stop connecting dots and coming up with ideas because, your whole life you're coming up with ideas. So did the extra time maybe in the shower, connecting dots and solving problems, did that help the writing process eventually?
It's hard to say. I think what more so helped was when we came back, we had 8 completed episodes, completely mixed, color corrected, and finished to look at. Normally what we're looking at as we're working are unfinished cuts with temp music, temp ADR, temp effects, and we don't get to see it finished till it airs. So in this instance, we got to come back and look at all 8 completed. We knew where we needed to go, but we also could take in what the footage and what the episodes were actually playing like, and what our jobs were to sort of swing the pendulum in a new direction for 9 to 13. So I think it was more just like the clarity of the hindsight of what we'd accomplished and what was successful and what we needed to adjust for the back half. And the season was already sort of broken up into these 3 movements. The first movement being the breakup of Ben and Addison. The second movement being Ben trying to make a new start and having this new relationship with Hannah. And the third was always going to be the consequences of that. You know, in 206, Tom literally tells Ben, what you're doing is a violation of Quantum Leap protocol. It can have major ramifications for the timeline. And spoiler, it did. So I think it was fun for us to sort of say, how do we really stick the landing now? And what work do we need to do with these 5 episodes to take the audience, Ben and Addison and Hannah, to this place we want to get to? More so that. And but the actual, like the shape of what the story was going to be and the heart of the story didn't change at all.
You can tell this episode was written by someone who loved the original series, and because there's all kinds of like nods to it and Easter eggs. Could you share all the stuff you packed into it that we might have saw or we might have missed?
Well, I don't want to like just throw shit around. I don't want to. I think that's just weak to just come up and just throw a member. No. Well,
that was a look and leap. That's awesome.
Yeah. For the podcast listeners out there, Drew held up Al's remote control car.
Yes, I did. I held up a black and white Corvette. I held up Bingo's car. Mm-hmm. Well, you know what's the most fun about this episode, this show, honestly, in a lot of ways, is, you know, and it was the same thing with Secret History. It's like you write this stuff, and then our amazing props and costume departments start making it all come to life and make things real. So there was, in the case of that, was like, what car do you want for the remote control car to be? And I was like, I know exactly what car I'd like this to be. But I think it was my rule for everything that I put into the episode was that it needed to all serve story here in the present of this iteration of Quantum Leap. So if we had just stopped to like dangle keepsakes or nostalgia just to stop and do that, it would feel cheap and it would feel exploitative. But what it was great about the story was that everything needed to come full circle. Everything these characters have been through, and the connections between the original series and this new adventure, all were going to come to the head. So it felt right to sort of tap into the past that was powering the characters' journeys now. And then also things just started happening subconsciously. Like I remember we were on a production meeting call, and originally in the script, Gideon was going to walk through a parked car and to reveal he's a hologram. And we were doing a production meeting, and our executive producer and producing director, Chris Grismer, who did an amazing job with this episode, as he always does. But really, this is a movie. This was like Quantum Leap the movie was my intention with it, you know. And he absolutely pulled off an insane schedule with his usual flair of artistry and heart. But he was like, can the car just drive through, Gideon? And immediately I was like, oh, I know what that is. And then 30 seconds later, Deborah Pratt emailed everybody screen grabs from The Color of Truth just to be like, it should look like this. So, you know, there's things like that. But there's also fun callbacks to this version of the show as well, you know. And, you know, Ben and Addison are back in a car and they're taking off to make a getaway. And there's just little moments that are tipping to like the advantage of this version, which is we can have serialized character development and we can remember where these people have been and they can remember where they've been. And that can influence the choices they're making and the emotional transitions that they're going through. So, you know, there was definitely stuff where I felt like we needed to address that video message Ben left in the pilot, because it's a very romantic notion that I'll find my way back to you, but we all know what show we're watching. And when we talked about the season in the beginning, we talked about Ben, Hannah, Addison, and Tom, the idea of like getting Tom and Addison together only to break them up so she can keep waiting for Ben seemed so wrong to all of us, that she would just put her whole life on hold and never, with us all knowing as writers, that's not going to work out so well, because that's not what happens for leapers most times. So this idea that we needed to confront that promise that Ben made, that Ben couldn't keep, you know, and admit and acknowledge what Addison has been slowly coming to terms with. And again, like in terms of things that connect to the past, you know, I always felt like Janice was doing what she was doing in season 1 for the reason we talk about in this episode. I feel like yes, it's her dad's project. Yes, she wants to save Quantum Leap, and killing Addison was meant to destroy Quantum Leap. And so, yes, she would come back. But if you go back and watch Fellow Travelers, when Jen and Janice first face off in Belize, Jen says, "Why are you helping Ben? You don't even know Addison. You don't even know her at all. So why are you risking everything to save her life?" And Janice does not answer. She doesn't give an answer to that question. So I always wanted to get to this idea of her very existence is tied into this project and what it can do. But on a deeper level, what was amazing was finding this parallel connection between Beth and Addison, that they both have their own MIA story, that they both didn't wait for someone and it just devastated somebody, and life could have gone a completely different way. But Quantum Leap gave Beth a second chance, and unbeknownst to Addison, it's going to do it again. And that all felt, again, like totally servicing this adventure and this story for these characters. So when we can do it that way, I'm all for it. And then there's certain things where it wasn't even my call. Like when Martin watched the cut, he was like, "I've got a musical cue suggestion for the editors." And I was like, "Are we going to do this?" So there was so much energy, excitement, and fun and zeal for this episode for people both who were diehards of the old series, who are more so just new people, new fans, crew members of the show. It felt like the culmination of a 2-season origin story for Ben and Addison in a way. And that was a really exciting momentum to give the episode, that it's all been leading to this moment.
It felt like there were so many payoffs to things that were set up in the first season and set up in season 2. And it felt like it was a great meeting of both of these things and both versions of the show without feeling like it was just tied to the old series. Like it was nice that there was all these callbacks, but like you were saying, it was servicing the story for Ben and Addison.
Weirdly, it was a lot of stuff I wanted to do last season. Like as soon as we introduced Janice's imaging chamber in the Handlick 3, we all knew as writers, Janice is not the villain of the season, right? She's an antagonist and an obstacle. We know she, so immediately I was thinking this would be great to go back and use these tools if we have to go rogue, because in 21st century Quantum Leap, we're just waiting for someone to take the keys away and do something selfish with this technology. So that was something I always wanted to get to do. And then also, paying off just Beth and Magic's relationship and how the complicated history she has with the project was affecting their relationship. But when push comes to shove, if it's in danger, the Calvici family will show up because of the debt they owe the program. So I think there's ways to do this stuff that is, it's a nice edge with nostalgia. You go the wrong direction and you will hit an artery and everyone will be very upset. But it felt like a celebration, and also in a great way, bringing in an antagonist who can attack the very premise of Quantum Leap, that it isn't worth a damn, that the way you're doing it is wrong, that, hashtag not my Quantum Leap, there's something interesting about that. And it becomes a battle for the soul of Quantum Leap itself. And what is it about? What does it really mean? And you're watching our heroes fight against this dark and gritty reboot on screen. It's happening before your eyes, but that's exciting, right? To give the show an antagonist with a really strong point of view, and to really take an optimist like Ben to the brink of despair and bring him back again is a great way to test him. And so I'm so happy with how all that came out, because I wanted it to be his finest hour in a lot of ways, and I feel like it is.
Yeah, it felt large in scope, but it also felt like it boiled down to something very simple about what it was about. And it just felt like that was the perfect way to go. It felt cinematic.
Thank you very much.
Yeah,
that's always the thing too. Like we're trying to do like for a modern network audience, there's certain elements of scale and scope we're supposed to give it. But if you lose the intimacy of what it's really about, then it doesn't feel like Quantum Leap. So there's something great about, feeling like in any other movie, we'd have to come up with some sort of like doomsday kill switch, but really what it's going to come down to is the superpower of Quantum Leap is always going to be empathy. And that is going to be Ben's superpower, just like it was Sam's. And so, but how do we do that in a way that feels climactic? And so, again, I got to give so much credit to Martin and Dean, who had such a vision for how to take this season in a new direction from last. And because last season was like, there was a pilot established already that had certain tracks laid out. this season was really, they could make it their baby from the very beginning and lay out these journeys. And the apology from Ben to the younger version of the antagonist was always on our checklist. And the ending for Ben and Addison, that was always on the checklist. So when I got my chance to write the finale, it was a question of, well, how do we make this harder? And Ben has given many a speech, just like Sam did, but what if that's not enough? And what if the only way to really change everything and to really change the future is not just to tell him what Quantum Leap is, but to show him and to involve this kid in it? And that felt like a really powerful means of communicating the message of the show, but also a powerful means of exploring, the predicament of a fatherless boy who needs some guidance and some wisdom and some care, and that's the point in time where Ben can actually can crack through at this moment in time. And that's how we engineered the whole season. Like, the reason we're in the 70s for these last two is all about that boy. And I was just so proud of Wyatt, especially, who, like every episode, you're relying on your guest cast to come in and be a part of the success of the show. We're only as successful as material and the talent we get to come in and play with Raymond every week. And I was kind of amazed, quite honestly, that James and Wyatt really felt like the same person. They really, when you went from face to face, you were like, this is the same guy. So it's kind of amazing that Ben's big face off with James, that's one big scene, but it feels like he's still in battle with the same character all the way through the rest of the episode.
I think one of the big strengths of it, though, when you say the cinematic scope, and there's just so much going on, so many moving parts, a lot of big story, at the end of the day, all of it hinges on completing the leap. And was that a very conscious decision? Because what it did, it served to ground the episode back into the heart of what I think Quantum Leap is. And I'm curious to know, when you're putting this together, do you have to confer with Benjamin and Derek, because they're coming before? It's almost sort of like a two-parter, because the story is so contiguous. Even though it's two different leaps, there are through lines in both episodes that carry it all the way through. It really is like one finale. So what's that process like?
That's a great question, because, as you know, we didn't know it was going to be a two-part finale event when we were writing these episodes, but we knew what 12 and 13 would do for one another, that there were clues in 12 that we would refer to in 13. So I definitely reached out to Ben and Derek earlier than normal to say, do you have a draft that I can read, just so I'm letting Gideon reference the right stuff that I need it to be accurate. And then there were a couple of things where I was like, oh, you should probably pull this out because you don't want him to know if it's been quite yet, and yada, yada. But really it was about, like, what stuff do you have there? And then there were interesting challenges too, right? Which is, they had Ben saving this boy's life. And I was like, well, how does that square with his origin story? And then I realized, well, it's still Ben's fault, right? Like, they didn't want to be there. He didn't want to be there. It's your fault I'm here. So there were really important blocks that need to go into this big Jenga tower from Ben and Derek's. And then you can always, what's great about our collaborative process is I can say, hey, it would really help if you left this out or put this back in, or whatever it is that would help this one, which is not a fair ask usually, but for the finale, you get a little bit of grace. So yeah, we worked a little bit like that, but we didn't prep them like a doubleheader, or the production was very separate, except for the way we shot the pieces of the flashback stuff. So for example, what was really a fun challenge for 213 is we were shooting pieces of it before the script was ever finished. So while 209 was being filmed, I had to write up the Hannah Josh flashback scene, and we had to go film it on location while 9 was being filmed. So we had an outline for 13, but the script wasn't finished yet. So I went out there, and Chris was there and shot that scene. And then, we knew our turnaround time was going to be super tight for VFX. So Addison stepping into the chamber was filmed before they ever saw the finished script. So we were, once again, like last year with those 3 leaps in the hyperleap, we were once again sort of planning ahead to pull off something impossible, because, as you may not have heard, we turned this episode in like 3 days before it airs, like as a finished file. So all that planning paid off, and it felt all sewn together. And then on a really weird level, and I'm not sure if you've talked to Ben and Derek yet, and this is just like fun movie god fate, but 212 was timing under and 213 was timing over, just on page count and then on actual screen time. And I was worried, what's going to come out? Like, is the Beth and Janice stuff going to come out? How are we going to make it to 42 minutes? And then part of the solution was we moved one of the first HQ scene of 13 into the end of 12. So the 12 got a banger of a cliffhanger, and we both got to keep our runtimes and do all the scenes that we had in mind. So it's interesting. Once it became a two-parter, it got even more enmeshed with one another in a weird way.
More than just the two-parter, since you had control of the finale, did that give you more of interest in following the Hannah and Ben and Jeffrey storyline all the way through the season? And what was your input on that, if any?
Well, what was really interesting about this season was that when it started, we were still making season 1. So I was on set producing episodes other writers had written while the room was already working on season 2. So I kind of felt a little, I was playing catch up in the beginning of season 2. Like, what about this? We're actually going to do this. And so the Hannah stuff and the time jump, that was all stuff that Dean and Martin were settling on and working through the room. And I was popping in and going back to set to shoot the airplane episode. And it was like, I was like, okay, well, I guess I'll contribute in some way at some point, and then I got 6, and 6 became something really special for me in a lot of ways. And one of those was like to really make the audience and Ben fall in love with or connect with Hannah in a major way as a major player in the season. So that was a great moment because I felt a little bit more ownership over my contributions to the show, but also it became a really nice template for their bond going forwards and a critical memory for both of them. And so I think by getting that episode and 13, I got to sort of, co-author some of the stuff in a deeper way than I did in the first half because of scheduling and getting ahead of the strike and stuff. And I definitely felt like the back 5 were almost more complex than Ben and Hannah. That was the middle chapter. And the third chapter was going to be the consequences of some of those decisions and the way that Addison and Hannah's bond would reveal itself in a really beautiful and profound way. So really, for me, it was more about how are we going to take care of all of these characters and get them to the finish line in a way that will feel satisfying as opposed to jarring. And the good news of that is when you have really talented showrunners who are smart about those things too, they're spot checking the episodes ahead of you. So Dean was way on point with, hold on a second, let's look at these episodes and make sure that we're getting the right character development and moving at the right trajectory so that they can arrive at this amazing finish line we have planned. And so it's a collaborative medium. We're all doing this together, and there's great ideas people had for this episode and even for 6 that weren't mine, but aided the vision that I had for both of them and the way they're supposed to feel. And I'm just amazed that we pulled it off because we would have loved more episodes. If it hadn't been for the strike, maybe we've gotten more and we could have done more, more Ian in the hologram chamber, more Jen, more fun stuff. But we only had these 5, so we really had to focus on Ben and Addison and how Hannah is moving from, this new love affair to the bridge between their points in time.
But you get more of that in season 3. More different hologram stuff. Just saying, season 3.
Exactly. We're going to need a new person in there, so there'll be lots of rock, paper, scissors in season 3.
Sure.
But I think it was done very well because when I got done watching the finale, it surprised me how much this season was Addison's story and how well you gave her a through line that, it connected all the way back to the pilot.
Yeah.
And oftentimes, you're so invested in that journey with Ben that you worked in so much stuff with Addison this season to give her like a true arc. She's not just the hologram. She's not just the pining girlfriend.
Yeah.
And I mean, she really comes into her own as a character in this. So what was it like working on those elements of the script? Because you have so many competing needs. You have to do the Ben stuff. You have to do the action stuff. You have to do the arc stuff. So it's like, when you're thinking about, okay, we need to really approach this and take care of Caitlin's character, like what were the guiding principles for that?
I mean, you're absolutely correct that 13 reveals in many ways what Addison's story has been all season, right? And so every scene that you're writing needs to service that reveal and service that journey. So even, that's part of why I felt like I could make the Beth and Janice backstory really work. Is it's all about Addison, and I wrote her reaction shot into the script because my mom never waited for him, needed to land on her, but also this feeling of powerlessness that she's often felt as the hologram. It's not what she was set out to do. She's a woman of action, and it's been a really fun conflict for her, and an inner struggle to be the person who cannot physically interact. That's part of why I had her kick some ass in the HQ scene, is to remind people, like, she has trained to do things very differently than our hero. So I think it's really just making sure that every scene is helping get you there. And even a scene as powerful as Ben and Jeffrey outside of that garage is doing double duty, because it's not just about Ben and Jeffrey. It's about Addison as well. And it's about her reconciling with the sacrifices Ben has made and the debt she hasn't been able to repay. And there's something really amazing that he said he was going to make his way back to her. And the end of the story is she gets there herself. She, with some help from this amazing person that had this almost spectral connection with her, she makes that leap herself, and they find each other in the past. And so that's why I think like the back five, it shifted, and it was a fun challenge, right? 206, I got to write Hannah as our leading lady for an episode and for this adventure and for this leap. And I remember Caitlin reading the script being like, "It's awesome. I wish I was in it more, but it's awesome." And I was like, just wait. You don't know. You have no idea how awesome it's going to be when we get there. So it's a delicate thing to like take your leading, your number two actor and say, we're going to, wrestle you out of this place that you're usually, a fixture of in the show, and force the character along with you to say, what is my purpose here? What am I supposed to be doing? Should I keep doing this? And how can I help? And that's why I think The Outsider is a great episode, among many reasons. Is there's just a scene of Ben and Addison sitting down on the floor and wrestling with what is their purpose, and what are they doing here? Can they find a narrative for themselves when the universe keeps making it feel like it's almost not worth trying? But of course it is. Even if it goes sideways, you have to try.
I love that 1 minute scene where they're on the floor and Ben's drunk, and there's the whole engaged, not engaged, not for me. I didn't think that was.
How about you? Yeah.
That was so perfect.
It felt like that whole scene. It was such a nice moment, but it felt like it was a shift. You could see that this was a new direction it was going in. It was going somewhere, and it was such a nice moment.
I agree. I love that scene.
Can you tell me when and how, and what was your reaction when you told Caitlin she was going to be a leaper?
I didn't tell her that. That was Martin and Dean are very open with the actors on the show. They're not. Some showrunners like to keep them in the dark. They're like, as much as your character knows. Martin and Dean aren't like that. They want an open line of communication so that the actors know that there's an arc, that there's a plan, and then we're taking them somewhere worthwhile. And so, they had a great chat with Eliza about who Hannah was and, where she came from, and the amazing, epic, time-spanning journey she was going to go on. And they had a big sit down with Caitlin about where Addison was going to go this year. And, it was a thing we kept, referring to, which is just remember that even as because Addison took a beating this year, emotionally, she took a real beating. But I was talking about this today with Dean and Sam, actually, just this idea that Dean said she wasn't ready to step into that accelerator until right now. She wasn't ready in season 1 in some ways. She wasn't ready when she was grieving for Ben and was ready to throw herself in there. And, but the journey she goes through this season, the journey they both go through this season, is why 13 plays out why it does. If Ben hadn't lost everything and lost his ticket home and lost the one he loved, he wouldn't be able to connect with Jeffrey the way he does outside of the garage. And so part of one of the many layers of the story is that the things we go through, the people we lose, the traumas we undergo, and the loss we feel, we have a choice as to how we decide to move forward and how we choose to see our own purpose in life and what we're going to do in the face of that pain. And some of us can give into anger and blame someone or something or a group of people. And some of us can choose to use what we've been through to connect with others who might be going through that same experience, and you can be there for somebody else because you might understand them better than anybody else walking down the street, what it's like to go through that. And so that was a great discovery for me as a writer, is what if everything we've built this season is all leading to this one, moment with this boy who needs someone to say, I've been where you are, and you have a choice, because we all do. And it's something that's real. And I know a lot of people were theorizing that we would save Josh, that we would save Tom's wife. And I think what was great about what Dean and Martin committed to this season was not everybody gets a magical ending, right? Like, things happen, and as we all know, that cannot be changed. And we still have to figure out a way to move forward. And so having those stories that couldn't get fixed really helped make this final episode of the season all the more urgent, immediate, and important, because we don't know that everything's going to be okay, but we still have to get up and try to make the world a little bit better in whatever way we can.
I really like the way that you played that off in the script as well, because when we think of our leaper, we think of someone who is selfless and just trying to do things for the greater good. And Ben is getting there. He's more seasoned now, but in that scene with Jeffrey outside of the garage, you can still see that tinge of bitterness, that tinge of regret that all of this has taken from him as well, but it doesn't deter him from trying to do the right thing. And it's nice to have that nuance, because if it's a little bit too do-gooder, then it gets to be like, well, okay, but it gives Ben layers, which I like.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that God, fate, time, whatever, Bruce McGill, whatever you want to call the higher forces, they're not always, like, the universe is not always kind, like, there's some Old Testament shit going on in the old show, or there's just like lots of stuff that just why there's a little bit of why for some of the things that play out, and that's real life. We don't know why, things just happen. And so what's fun about a show like Quantum Leap is we can oscillate between it's all meant for a reason, and maybe it's not, maybe it is. These characters got to wrestle with some of that this season. And, I feel like a lot of the episodes we wrote are part of 13. There's little echoes of things and callbacks to things. But one of those is just that scene with Tom and Magic in episode 4, where he says, what if the engine of Quantum Leap is sacrifice? What if that's always how it's supposed to be? And it was really interesting to sort of confront that in this episode, especially with our team, that maybe this is what we're being asked to do. Maybe we are all being asked to give something up for a greater good. And they're all willing to do it, and they do. They all give the ultimate sacrifice for something they believe in.
I loved that, like, Ben was given a choice of how to fix this future, and he's basically given a couple choices, but he picked a third option that didn't exist, and it was just perfect for Ben. When did that idea come about? Was that in the room when you talked about the whole season arc?
No, it was again, like, we had the apology was sort of like in stone on the tablet, So for me as a writer, it's like, well, we need to make that matter, and we need to make it feel surprising but inevitable. So what's great about the story is Gideon is so casually cruel and savage in the way he's going about this. I mean, he violates the sanctity of our HQ. He throws us out. He is isolating and abandoning Ben. He's going to do terrible things, but he is beyond redemption in a lot of ways. And so when the team is finally coming back together and you have this wonderful, like, A-team type, like cavalry arriving, you're all in on, like, let's get this. I mean, I don't know how much I could swear in the show, but let's go get this guy. Let's take him out. And there's a feeling of, like, and it's not like Quantum Leap's never dispatched a bad guy before. Like, it's totally within the rules of the show. And then it gets even darker when Jen gives her life to buy Ben more time. And by that point, we're just hurtling towards this. We're like a missile headed for this garage. We're going to blow this shit up, and we're going to save the day. And so all that is moving. But what's, again, it's just making that choice feel as strong as possible, which is even though, and what I love about our show in a lot of ways is that Ben lived for such different reasons than Sam. And so what you're seeing play out is this reckoning with this destiny that wasn't supposed to be his. It really wasn't, it was supposed to be Addison's. But his heart has always been that of, a good Samaritan traveling through time. He just didn't know that's what he was going to be. So it's, this doesn't feel right is something I didn't realize I was cribbing it, but like it's I rewatched MIA recently. It's the same thing that Sam says to Al. So that barometer is the human heart, and that's integral to your job if you're, the lead of a Quantum Leap series. But then again, it was also like, but I want to go further. And so what if that wouldn't have been enough? Even as powerful as the journey Ben's been on, what if it wouldn't have been enough unless he said, come with me and do what I do, see what I do it with, like, help someone you don't even know. Because that you could prevent them from going through what you've been through. And that's noble. And it's also, it's talking about and exploring empathy in a way that is heroic. It's not weak. I think that's the key for me is like, we talk about empathy like it's being nice to everybody. I don't think that's what it really means. It means like being able to connect with another person and what they're going through, because it feels like it feels spiritually righteous in some way, and Jeffrey is worth saving. He is, he's not the enemy. Ben's not the enemy. Time is the enemy. And so I thought that was a beautiful way to explore that. And also I just wanted to sort of, the thing that was also great with the episode is it's just a series of almost like nesting dolls of father-son stories. You've got Rick Jarrett Sr. and you've got Jeffrey and his father, and then you've got Ben, who's being a son in one story and almost a surrogate father figure for the other, just long enough to help this kid correct his future.
I loved the misdirect, the like roller coaster ride in this last episode, because when you find out, and it's pretty obvious that Addison's going to leap to bring Ben home and sacrifice herself and send her back in time. And you could see the emotion in her face. And at home, I'm like, no, then they still can't touch and they won't be together. Don't do this. Get somebody else, anybody else. This is unfair. So I bought that hook, line, and sinker. And then to actually have them leap together, what was that like coming up with that story?
Again, it was just like when we talked at the beginning of the season, the time jump had been decided on, this new quadrangle relationships had been decided on. And so it really was about like, what's the most satisfying ending of that story? And for Addison to keep waiting just felt, I would have disliked everybody. I would have been mad at Ben for making her do that. I would have been mad at Addison for leaning into the status quo of television instead of emotional reality, and it just, it seemed like the most satisfying and surprising ending. And what it's funny, I specified that song that we ended up using in the script because I wanted it to feel like a new beginning as opposed to something from the past or even an ending, and Addison and Ben had a theme all through season 1 and the top of season 2, and the tone of that theme was very mournful and like kind of elegiac. It was they were mourning something they were trying to get back, but they might never get back. And this needed to feel different because in a lot of ways, their relationship still has so much further to go because they're not engaged. There's a lot of places that they need to sort of begin new from, but there's a promise of something that is exciting and they're both in a better place. And I think there's something great about Ben basically saying, I've lost all these things and I'm not going to get them back. And I have to just keep going. And then it's beautiful that it was in the script, but the way Raymond does it is so beautiful where you see him after that leap and he's just like, damn, once again, he got his hopes up and they were crushed. And, when we first talked about this ending in the room, even before I was going to write it, I had this image of Addison bumping into somebody. And I thought that's the greatest way for Ben to realize that their entire reality has shifted, is to see her make contact and realize he's not looking at his hologram. He's looking at the person who's physically here with him. So to get to build as a moment that sense of anticipation and, oh my God, this is actually happening. Like even when I watched the director's cut, I was like, oh my God, we're doing this. And I was there when we shot it, but I was still like, we're actually doing it. And I'll say that the night we shot that scene was really special because, we all don't know what the future of the show is. But the night we shot it, everybody was getting these chills. Even like in the master, we were like, "Oh my God, this is so powerful." Anna lit it. Anna, our DP, lit it so beautifully. And Chris, our director, was the one who suggested, we've done the holographic hand touch so many times. I want to pay that off. And so it was this wonderful collaboration of like the bump, but also the hand touch. And there was dialogue there to talk about like, I did it for this reason and didn't work. Maybe it did work. And we just took it all out. We didn't need it. You really didn't need it. And you didn't need big scope. You didn't need to be cast of thousands. You just needed to be here with these two people. And I was watching Caitlin and Ray do this scene, and I was with Shakina, a writer who was shadowing Chris as a director, and we were just like turning to each other, monitor. Are you seeing this? This is amazing. So it was just like, that's the feeling I want to go out of, but also like in the script it says there's screams, there's explosions, people need help, and they continue on, like, they join hands and they continue on the adventure, this quantum entangled pair. So it just felt like that's whatever happens with the show, that's an ending that I as a fan feel satisfied by and excited by, and I'm so glad we got to do it because it. I've watched many a show that ended on a cliffhanger, and I was like, "What?" But this feels like whether we keep going or don't keep going, we've told a great story. I think that really pays off the investment that the audience gave us for however long they've been watching.
I think that ending was the best scene in the whole show.
Oh, Allison, you're so nice.
It was awesome. It was so exciting and hopeful and romantic. And then when it ended, I'm like, this can't be it. Like, what's going to happen next? I was so excited. And then it was great.
We're excited too because, these two people have very different styles. Even in the episode you're seeing, and so to see them out there together and making connections with people together, and also there are stories we've already talked about that would really be, mind bending just enough but not losing sight of the heart that we need to continue to maintain. And I just think that there are so many possibilities for what those stories can look like and where it can go. And I would love to tell more of them because I feel like I was on set with Raymond shooting this episode, and he was just like, I feel like we've just scratched the surface of what we can do. I was like, I do too. I really think I think season 2 had a level of ambition that paid off. And I feel, and it's not about budget. I mean, budget helps because it's nice to have explosions and set dressing and all that stuff and sets. But, it's what kind of stories that we can tell that nobody else can. Like when I heard the break for 12 and I was like, Addison and Hannah get a scene together. Like there's no other show on TV that can do that scene. That's amazing. So I think there's a lot more we can do. And there's, I hope we get to.
We hope so too.
Yeah, we do. And I'll say, I mean, I know that you guys had the ending planned out, so you knew that Ben and Addison were going to be together as Leapers. But as an old school fan, I couldn't help but think that it was going to be more like a leap back situation. I fully expected Ben to be the hologram, so I wasn't surprised that Addison was there. I was surprised that Ben was there.
Well, so it's so funny you're all saying this because I was curious how people would. I thought that might be the mislead. Like for me, it was less like a mislead and more like a feeling of something. Like I don't know, it's hard to explain. But even when I watched it, it's like the music and the spell it's casting. It's for me, it wasn't like a no, but it is like a wow. Something. These two ships are going to pass in the night in some way, but it's going to be beautiful because he did it for her, and now she's doing it for him. And yeah, it's a wonderful, unexpected reward from whatever's in charge up there, or from Hannah herself, whatever you choose to interpret that ending to be. And it's way more fun than having Ben be the hologram for,
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And it's new like frontiers in leaping, which is nice. And it's got precedence in the show because we saw Sam and Aaliyah leap together. So we know that leapers can be in tandem.
Yep.
So it all dovetails. One thing that I noticed that this season embraced, and I've been a broken record about it on the podcast, I asked Dean Georgaris about it, but it seems to me that season 1 very much wanted to establish this project as its own thing. And it seems to me that in season 2, as you got more comfortable with this version of Quantum, you started to touch back on some of the bigger themes that were in the Legacy series, specifically the spiritual aspect, the GTFW aspect, as we call it on the show.
Yeah.
And I was wondering, how conscious was that? Was that kind of a directive going forward? And the bigger question is, do you guys feel that the show now is so much more established as its own thing that you feel a little bit more comfortable touching back on some of the Legacy stuff because the show can still stand on its own? It doesn't need that, but it helps enrich it in the mix.
That's a great question. You know, because I know a lot of people are like, "Are you gonna get Bakula? Are you gonna get Bakula?" And like, of course, we would love to get Scott back on the show, but like, I also feel like we are telling a story that is absolutely earning its keep on its own. Like, these characters are wonderful, and I am the first person who will roll their eyes at a cynical reboot of something, you know. But you know, when I'd actually worked with Raymond for a day on something a long time ago that he didn't even remember, but you know, I knew that he had a quality as a human being, not like the character, but as a person. He was the right person for this new generation of the story. You know, like, he is that guy. It's not an act. He sets that tone. He is that person for the crew, for the cast, for the guest cast, you know, interviews, whatever it is. Like, he's just that kind of person. And that's wonderful. But I also think that this season, what you're responding to is less like us sitting down and saying, hey, let's be more like this. Or it's more that the time jump itself instigated these questions for the characters to be asking, right? Like, Ben feels like Job. Like, why have you forsaken me? I did everything right. I did this to save somebody. I saved Quantum Leap, and this is what happens to me. And so right away, it's, what the hell, universe? What's that about? And that follows through for everybody in the 3-year gap, like Addison. And then I think, like, it was writing choices, like, of how to, like, add this philosophical bent to Tom. And so these things just started kind of popping up. But then the Hannah story itself, by its nature, it's very romantic. It's a beautiful sci-fi romance, but it asks questions, right? Like, how is this happening? Who is doing this? Why is this happening? And what's great about the season is that it's emotionally honest to a degree that, like, we don't know why things happen in our own lives. We don't know. We can choose to see a narrative and see a purpose, or say God is real and has a plan, or the universe is this, or I'm manifesting, you know, whatever you want to believe. We have to make those choices for ourselves. So no one comes in and explains exactly why. These are all theories people are having. But it's like Dean said on this podcast, I believe, like, that you are asking questions that we don't always have the answers to, not because we're not smart writers, but because the characters will never get those answers that they're looking for. They have to choose what they believe. And so that was a really cool thing to explore this season, and to have people like Addison and Hannah looking for meaning. And I think it's because they're in love. Jen thinks it's because you need two people for some of these leaps, you know? And Hannah's thinking, like, I think I'm in your life for a reason. And that reason is to fulfill something that you're meant to do, which is get home. So I think it came from there. And then also, I think there were ties to the first season, to the original series in the first season as well. But I think all eyes were on, like, whether Scott was coming back on a lot of that stuff. Like, why is it? It was looking for that, I think, from a viewer standpoint, which was not the story we were telling yet. But I think this season we were able to connect to stuff, but I think we had a stronger A plot that you could really emotionally connect to. And so the things that came from the old series were like beautiful seasoning on something that was already a really satisfying meal, to mix metaphors.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it, though.
I loved Ben and Addison reconnecting, and what was chosen for their touch of their hand and their hug. Was there ever any talk of, like, a different kind of embrace? Because I know they're not really together again yet, but that spark is there, and they've waited so long to actually physically be together again. But was there ever a talk of doing it different? Or
we talk about, like, everything that you have theorized about, we've probably talked about, like, you know, not to speak too far out of school, we definitely talked about, like, Lothos as something. We've talked about all of this stuff, but that's Lothos is like, that's such a huge piece of mythology, for example. And the story we're trying to tell this season is, you know, it's personal. It's a personal story. It's about a woman and Ben and her child. Like, it's just that's the story we're telling, right? So we talk about this stuff, but at the end of the day, it's like, what is the best story for now? And it felt like, listen, we've done a lot for the Ben and Addison, like, do-si-do this season. And it felt like we don't have time to earn more than what we're going to get in that final moment. And that's story for later, like what their relationship's going to look like, and to see them maybe fall in love again or whatever we could do. Like, those are great stories to tell and great opportunities to get into. Right now, it's the relief that they'll never be, hopefully they're no longer alone. They're no longer disconnected. They are two particles existing as one. And so I think maybe in script there was a near kiss that was interrupted by an explosion, but we didn't even do that. But it was always this sense of this physical contact, this sense of home, and then, duty calls was always the.
Was that part of the reason of choosing where they leapt? I'm guessing like middle of World War II-ish, in Fairhaven.
I'm so glad you asked that question, Albie. I'm so glad you asked that question because in season 1 I'm really proud of Somebody Up There Likes Ben and Fellow Travelers, but both of those episodes began in wildly different forms, wildly different leaps, wildly different. They were just very different. And so even though I was very proud of how those episodes turned out, and I really loved Daryl, and I really loved Carly, and I really loved those episodes, I also lamented that there were some stuff I wanted to do that I didn't get to do. There's just stuff I didn't get to do in season 1 for various reasons. So when we got to this episode, it's like, what's that leap out going to be? Somebody said, it should feel like that episode you didn't get to do in season 1. It should feel like that. And I was like, that's exactly what it should be. So I think it was, how do we feel? Again, we're casting a spell. We're somewhere else in time, but it needed, like, you nailed it when you said Casablanca. Like, it needed that something cinematic and beautiful, but Jeopardy. And so we never, even the script it said, European World War II Street, but we didn't specifically say when and where we are exactly, because that's 301's job. But I think it felt so satisfying for me, because it was like one more thing that I wanted to do with the show that now I get to do in this, total dream episode, which is crazy because I got to do that already with Secret History. So you don't normally get to do like a dream episode once, let alone twice in a season, because there's so many compromises you got to make making television. There's just so many things that fall apart or change. You got to adjust. But Martin and Dean gave me so much freedom to feel some ownership over those stories while still maintaining the vision of the story that they set out to do this year. And so, yeah, that's where that came from. It was like, I want the feeling of that episode I didn't get to write in one scene, and it'll make it iconic. And that's what we did.
It also gives that sense of urgency, and they hit the ground running, so they don't have time for their personal relationship, and they just got to get the job done, kind of thing.
Let's focus on the leap is the new T-shirt, right? It's the...
I think it was like a really smart decision to cut out all of the dialogue. Like, why did I do this? This is what happened. Big speeches. Just don't let go, and then get to the action, get to the leap. Yeah,
it's also, I want to shout out Ian Mayberry, our editor, who did just a phenomenal job. And we were texting before we started shooting. He was like, I feel the energy coming off these pages. Like, I'm so excited to cut this episode. And some of the choices Ian made in the edit, I was like, this is not what I expected, but it's amazing. Like, just the way Act 5 plays and the use of the temp score he was using and the final score that Daniel wrote had this sort of elliptical, Philip Glassian repetition. It wasn't like, in the script it probably read like, go, 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 go. Like, this has happened, like all this, parallel action of Jeopardy, Jeopardy, Jeopardy. But there's a spell being cast in the 5th act of the episode that just feels like oddly poetic. It's still super high urgency and high jeopardy, but there's something almost poetic about all these moments in time happening. And so when he was cutting that scene, like, he beautifully edited the music. And then when I was watching the director's cut, like, music rose and then it crashed back down because we had to have dialogue. It was like, no, even I know, I wrote these words. Even I know we want this feeling to keep elevating and keep rising. And so we took it, and Martin knew that right away. I was there when he watched it. He's like, we're taking all that out. I was like, great. Because, emotion trumps logic. We don't need to explain what just happened. It's more important to feel it.
And yeah, you certainly did. I mean, it was a wonderful moment, and if it is the last scene that we get from this iteration of Quantum Leap, it's almost like a perfect snapshot.
Yeah.
To leave us with, and I'm not saying that that's what I want.
Of course not. Of course not.
Season 3 all the way, but if it does end this way, it sticks the landing. It really does, because you can see them moving forward together, and that's really all you need. If you're a fan of their relationship and a fan of this show, they're in a good place.
They're in a good place, and they're still out there. And Sam is still they're out there. That once you leap, you're out there, and it's really interesting. Like when I watched the episode, it really feels like Addison is transforming, or it just feels like when I watch it, it really feels like the nature of stepping on an accelerator is to sort of part with your mortal coil and become something, a spiritual being in a lot of ways. And it really, every time I watch it, I feel like she is embracing her better angels, both metaphorically and literally in a lot of ways, And so I know that, like, not to compete or talk down Mirror Image, because it's earned its place for multiple reasons, both heartbreaking and appreciated. But I felt like I would want just, if we don't know what's happening in the future, I want us to be able to deliver something that would make me feel satisfied and hopeful. And so I'm just amazed that we got to do it. And I'm so happy with how it was executed.
I know it was not an easy task to create something that could be a continuation, but could also be a satisfying conclusion if this is the last season. And I think you succeeded.
Thank you, Allison.
I would be lying if I didn't say, when I saw Ben and Addison touch, that I was doing quick math in my head, and I'm not good at math, but I was thinking, well, if they're both leaping and they had to leap to bring someone home, who did they bring home? So I was like trying to figure out, was just the formula wrong? Was it for us to decide? Maybe somebody came home, maybe somebody didn't, or what's the thought process on that when you're breaking that?
Okay, so I'm going to try to delicately dance around this question, because I'm trying to maintain the interactive nature of the season, which is there's stuff that you can interpret. There's a lot of stuff that we haven't even talked about you can interpret in different ways. But I think the thing to remember when you rewatch 12 and 13 is that Ian calls it a swap code. Gideon calls it a swap code. Hannah calls it a quantum code to bring you home. So that's maybe where I should end the answer.
Okay. I like that.
She did bring him home.
Exactly.
Because home's a person.
She did.
The whole nomads line. Yep.
I mean, it's like you can, whether it's her, whether it's something larger, whether it's both, he's home. Home
is where the heart is.
Yep.
Yeah.
Will Bruce McGill be running a bar in World War II?
We are monitoring Bruce McGill's health very closely.
Better do it sooner than later, right?
Yeah, I mean, it was, it's funny. This is kind of a segue, but these are all, I really loved and missed, especially in the first half of the season, like the theorizing that fans do and the creativity that everybody has. And I remember when Matt said, you should really listen to the 206 thing, because we really dug it. And so I listened to it, and I was so tickled when Chris and Matt started talking about butterfly effects. They were like, can't get too crazy, because then it's not quantum leap. But if it, and you guys, you were so like, I can't, but I must, but I can't, but I must, about like your time travel nerd side versus like, well, what is canon? And I'm sitting there listening to it, being like, well, we're doing this, so whether you like it or not, we are going to do it. We're going to do it. But like these are these big ideas and these things that have come before. Like I'm excited and aware that there's a lot of lore that we can tap into. But I think our instincts are to only do it the right way. And there's so many cool things we could have done this season, but it wasn't the right time. And when it is the right time and we have the right stories, there's stuff we can reach for that is really awesome and amazing. And then also I think we have to keep creating our own mythology too. And I think, I think we utilize even just the technology of our new advanced 2022 to 2026 timeline, HQ, to do new stuff with stories. Like our ability to view the leaps had major impacts on the drama of these characters, and for Gideon in the finale, like being one step ahead of our heroes. So I think there's a line to walk between how much we reach back for stuff and where we innovate and do our own thing. And I think that's what's so cool about season 2 is I was worried people were going to cry trilogy with Hannah, but it's such a different vibe, and it's more, it's a different story, right? It's different in the ways that matter, and it feels special. And I think Eliza was a miraculous addition for the show. I worked with her on The 100. She was amazing on that show, but a different character entirely. After seeing her play Hannah, I'm like, oh, she can play anything, because she can go from dark to light and charming to, genocidal. I mean, she's really amazing. And I think that character she elevated the season, and she added some, like a new iconic character to the mythology of Quantum Leap itself. So whether we get to Bruce McGill or not, we should invent some stories and things like that along the way. And then who knows?
Well, I think a strength of the new series, especially as season 2 closes, is that you can, but you don't have to.
Right.
And that's one thing, like you're talking about Matt and I saying, or the butterfly effect, what are they going to do? Then it's not Quantum Leap. And that's because we're thinking like legacy fans. This is what Quantum Leap is, but you take us by the hand or by the throat, depending on what the story is. And you say, no, this is what we're making it. And as long as you execute it properly, you give the fans what they don't know they want. Something new. Something new to latch on to. And it's an evolution of the property. So it keeps it from getting to be too much of the same thing.
Right.
Otherwise, you're Star Wars. You want to keep growing. You want to keep evolving. And I think that was the main strength of this season, is that now Quantum Leap is poised to be something new again.
Yeah.
And that's always the most exciting place to be, because it doesn't negate all the stuff that happened before. It's just that was there. That's our foundation. Now we're here.
Yeah.
And you did it in a way that it all still works. It's all together. It doesn't betray anything. So
thank you very much for saying that.
Probably.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely was like, I was prepping my defense. I was like, well, listen, Honeymoon Express did this, and Leap for Lisa did this. We can, like, I was just like arming myself for my day in court. But it was also like, what's been really exciting is to play with point of view in a way that the original didn't, right? So, for example, like Mirror Image rewrote the entire show, but we choose to believe like it mostly played out the same, and Al probably made less sexually suggestive comments because he was, a happily married family man in most of the episodes now, or whatever it is. But like, things changed radically all the time, and we just didn't see it because we were in Sam's point of view, or we were with, like we're with Al, he looks away, he looks back, or Sam looks away, looks back, and it's one person changes. What's really exciting about this is like, well, what does it look like for the people that Leapers leave behind? What is it like to see a stranger come into your house with one face and see them again years later with another face, and your mother has this weird, inappropriate relationship with them? Like, it really, I love that sequence because it's really showing you like Ben's the boogeyman to this child, like, and will always be. And same thing with what happens at the end of the butterfly effect. It's like these characters are actively changing their own past, right? They're taking part in it. And so we know that the show rewrote time every episode. We just didn't see what that looked like, right? And so I'm not saying it looked like this every time. I'm saying when these characters choose to step in and face the music of their own history being rewritten, it might feel like this. It might feel like an act of God or time or fate or whatever, and so it's exciting to use this new series, to use those ideas and show them in new ways and tell new stories. Because if we're just doing a new version of Leap Home Part 2, or like we're just redoing it, we're not going to win, and so I think what's great about the season is it really earned all the choices we made to make the show different. really got earned this season in ways that brought these characters home in ways both literal and metaphorical.
Well, it was nice to see the connections between the two series, but it didn't feel like it became Quantum Leap is a show about itself.
Right.
A lot of properties are nostalgic about themselves without actually moving forward.
Right.
So it was nice that it felt like it existed in the same universe, but it wasn't like, let's stop to reference this or let's do this. Like, it all made sense what was brought in and why and how it serviced the story.
I'm glad you felt that way. Yeah, I think we there's so much great material and so many beautiful stories that Deborah and Dawn and that writing staff put together, and there's stuff we almost did where we're like, this is gonna, you also have to be aware of the audience percentage wise, how much of them are hardcore and how much of them are normies, and there's some stuff rules wise we thought of that might have been just too inside for people to wrap their mind. What's crazy about Quantum Leap, I think, is like it's like most shows and most sci-fi premises have like one buy-in. Quantum Leap has like 5. It's like he's a time traveler, but also he's leaping into people, or not really leaping into people because it's just his aura. But also there's a hologram who's also in the back. It's like there's all these, there's so many things going on, and that's what makes it really exciting, because the stories can do so many things. But you just have to be aware that, like, if you don't keep the drama and everything to an immediate, emotionally intimate center, then all that stuff's just going to, overwhelm it. So I think, we found a lot of those great stories this season, and I still think there are so many wonderful characters they can meet and lives they can change in ways that can really surprise us and move us. So I'm hoping we can continue to do that.
Well, we've been going for a little over an hour. Maybe we should. We don't want to take too much more of your time, Drew.
No, but you have one question you have not asked me yet, Chris. About leaping into people's bodies.
Okay. Wait, we're going to go mind body.
This debate could go on forever.
Yeah, no. This is you. When I went back and because after Matt passed, I went back and re-listened, and you were like, "Oh, I forgot to ask about this, about the." So I'm going to answer this question you're not even asking, but
refresh my memory on what it, because I say
like,
a lot.
Oh, he's writing these episodes where like he's drawing attention to the physical capabilities or liabilities of the person he's leapt into. Mm-hmm. And I'm shocked you forgot to ask it again. Shame on you, two demerits from Gryffindor. But
I'm a bad fan. What do you want?
You're a very bad fan. You go sit in the corner. But I will answer that now and say that I think that's another part of this iteration that if we get another season, I'm very excited by, which is Ben can literally walk in somebody else's shoes. And that's, I'm not criticizing the original. Like, I'm saying that like this version of the technology and him being physically experiencing what they experience, the kinds of stories you can tell, whether it's about addiction or, mental illness or anything, or just any, disability, there's stories you can tell in those arenas that can be really interesting and really emotionally powerful for Ben and the audience to experience, that I think are worth exploring and can be really exciting. And then also there can just be fun ones where he's just doing something he didn't know he could do. But I just think it's a way of taking that modus operandi and making it more literal, which is like, it's not the appearance of it. It's I'm actually part of this person, what they're feeling, or all that stuff can crawl through every time if we want to, or it just depends on what the story is. But I just think it's a cool way to lean into the lack of waiting room.
Yeah, and I like that aspect of this show. It took me a while to wrap my head around it because I'm so used to the waiting room and the swap and body, mind, aura. We like to have fun on the show. I just do it to annoy Allison. I always say, I don't know if it's mind or body. We all know it's his body. But when I saw Secret History, and I think it was Secret History, when Ben is limping.
Yeah.
And it reminded me of a tenet that they had, I guess, in the Bible for the original series, where I think Don said if Ben leaps into a watchmaker, he doesn't know how to build a watch. If Sam leaps into a watchmaker, he doesn't know how to build a watch. Well, that's not necessarily true for Ben. If he leaps into a watchmaker, that watchmaker is still there. He has the muscle memory. He could maybe tap into some of that stuff.
Well, you play with the latitude of that, which is like, he doesn't know how, but if he were start doing, like, there's I think that's what's fun, right? Is like how much of this is like I know exactly how to do this, and how much of this is like with a little work you could start. Like that's what was great about somebody up there like Ben. It's like
exactly.
You don't know how. If you work on this, you and this body will work together to do this thing, and it'll So I think there are other cool ways to explore that stuff, and we don't have to do every episode, but I think it is it's more potential for new, more interesting stories we can tell.
Yeah, it's a neat wrinkle, and it just adds to, like you said, the storytelling potential and the potential for drama, because you can have stakes for Ben. It's not like he's a legless veteran who can suddenly get up and walk.
Right.
So it's a pretty neat wrinkle, and I've grown more accustomed to it. Maybe that's why I'm not asking it, because I've sort of settled that question in my head now.
And now I've riled it up like a basketball. Was there anything else we should get into before we wrap up?
I got a couple silly questions that's come up over the season. So if is Jeffrey Ben's kid or not? Did they do it in
I heard Chris go on about this, but I think 12 actually in 12 Hannah implies they talked a lot that night, so they were talking. There's not a post-coital scene in 208. No, he's not. We made a choice to say it's like 2 years after, like he was 7 instead of 9. And we talked about that. I think for some of us, we felt like if Ben becomes an absent father, I would be very upset with him. And if we weren't going to keep telling that story of him being involved in some way, shape, or form, I just, for some of those reasons, it was like, it would have been a hell of a twist, but it would have also, I would have expected Ben to check in on that person for the rest of the series. And if he didn't, I would have been mad at him for the rest of the series. So.
Yeah. And I have to say, I mean, I had that question and I was doing some mental gymnastics to try to make it fit.
Yeah.
But
all of us.
The story is actually so much better that it's not Ben's kid.
Right.
I mean, hinges on that. So it's a much better choice.
Yeah.
I think it would have become trilogy in the way that I don't like trilogy.
Then in season 3, Jeffrey and Sammy Jo team up, and they are
the super team.
She's super old because
damn it, you took my idea. No,
I'm
would
sorry.
it have been Ben's kid or the Leapies? Leapy?
That was the other thing. We were
toying with the idea. Leapy's body would be his.
It would have been Wonder Woman 84's kid, basically.
Yeah.
Okay. Those are my silly questions.
Right.
The other one was like we were hinted at that there's things peppered in throughout the whole season that we'd figure out by the end. Was there anything we missed, the fan community?
No, I think it was the Beth Addison thing. That was the big one that people didn't pick up on, which is great. Like it sort of arrives and it feels like, oh, of course. But that's the big one, which is so it's interesting that people were like, some people were so mad at Addison when we didn't feel that way about Beth. Like she's, it helped. You saw her wrestling with it in MIA, but that's the main one I would say. And then there's just like Addison's journey. If you look at it in the very first episode of the season, if I'm not mistaken, and I think I'm correct on this, the first flashback Ben has is her in the white Fermi suit training. So the first time we saw Addison was the first breadcrumb of where we were going at the end.
Yeah, it came together very well.
Very good. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you all for everything, all your contributions and coverage and criticisms and attaboys and praise and just everything you've done and continue to do after we lost Matt. And I really thought of him so much when I was writing this, and I was so excited to share it with him. And I'm so heartbroken that we didn't get to, and that he's not here anymore. But I really think that in some ways that I can't explain, I think he's in this episode in some strange and profound ways. And so, we appreciate all of you, and we miss Matt, and we're grateful that we are all able to connect over this thing. And in light of everything that's been going on, it's been nice to just connect and talk to you guys and talk to Sam and talk to everybody and feel the community is still a community.
And I think I speak for all of us here at the QLP when I thank you personally and the cast and the crew for the way you came together for us. at the time, and we will never forget it. It helped pull us through, quite frankly. And that's a big part of the reason why we're still doing this, to honor Matt's legacy, and also because we know that when things were down, you had our backs. So thank you so much. You're the first person I've been able to speak to directly about this face to face, so to speak. So I just want you to know that it was greatly appreciated, and it was almost like a life raft at times. Thank you.
That means a lot. I think all this stuff that we're doing is, I think we all, if you're a fan of Quantum Leap, you're a certain kind of person anyways, right? And we're all looking for something hopeful and positive and kind towards one another, because the world is hard enough as it is. And it's also because we've never met most of you in person, but we definitely feel it on this side as well. So thank you all, and hopefully we'll see you in season 3.
Thank you, Drew.